Has this ever happened to you? A whisper, subtle at first, then growing into a roar, telling you that your strength is somehow unfeminine, that your righteous anger is merely hysteria? For generations, the delicate, often demure image of the feminine has been etched into our collective consciousness. We've been taught to believe that true feminine power lies in gentle submission, in nurturing quietude, in a softness that never dares to ruffle feathers. But what if this portrayal is a deliberate misdirection, a veil drawn over a deeper, more primal truth? What if the very essence of the feminine soul, when pushed to its limits, reveals not weakness, but a sacred fury, a force capable of reshaping worlds and dismantling the very chains that bind it? Consider the ancient tale of Alara, a woman whose life was a tapestry woven with threads of societal expectation and internal yearning. From her earliest days, Alara was lauded for her grace, her empathy, her seemingly endless capacity for forgiveness. She moved through the world like a soft breeze, bending to accommodate, never truly asserting, always striving to maintain harmony, even when it cost her own peace. Her village, nestled in the shadow of the brooding mountains, valued placidity above all else, and Alara, in her quiet conformity, was their idealized daughter. Yet, beneath the serene surface of Alara's demeanor, a restless current stirred. It was a tremor of unexpressed desires, a pang of injustice quietly swallowed, a burgeoning awareness of the disparity between her outwardly gentle existence and the simmering cauldron of her inner world. She often found herself staring at the untamed peaks, feeling a kinship with their unyielding strength, a longing for something wild and untamed within herself. Her days were spent tending to the needs of others, her nights often haunted by a recurring dream. A lone wolf, howling at a blood-red moon, its cry a primal lament, a yearning for release. This dream, a potent symbol of her suppressed instincts, became a subtle torment, an insistent tapping on the door of her conscious mind. Was this the shadow archetype, as Carl Jung might describe it, the unacknowledged aspects of her personality, clamoring for integration? The parts of herself that society, and she herself, had deemed unacceptable or unfeminine. The village elders would often praise her sweet disposition, a phrase that, over time, began to feel like a silken cage, restricting her true expression. She saw other women, those who dared to speak their minds, to demand their due, being subtly ostracized, labeled as difficult or unladylike. The fear of this judgment, a powerful form of operant conditioning as B.F. Skinner might have observed, reinforced her adherence to the prescribed feminine ideal. One sun-scorched summer, a devastating drought descended upon the village. The crops withered, the river dwindled to a trickle, and desperation began to gnaw at the community. The men, traditionally the leaders, grew despondent, their usual solutions failing. Whispers of sacrifice, of appeasing angry spirits, began to circulate, born of fear and superstition. Alara watched, a silent observer, as her village slowly unraveled. She saw the fear in the eyes of the children, the despair etched on the faces of the elders. And in that moment, something shifted within her. The gentle breeze that was her external persona began to gather force, a burgeoning tempest building in the depths of her being. She remembered the wolf, its fierce independence, its unwavering will to survive. A raw, unbidden anger, a sacred fury, began to stir within her, not a destructive rage, but a protective, transformative fire. It was the fury of a mother watching her children starve, the fury of a guardian witnessing her home crumble. This wasn't the irrational outburst that society often mislabels as feminine hysteria. It was the focused intensity of a being pushed beyond endurance, a primal scream for justice and survival. She started studying the ancient maps, the forgotten pathways to distant, rumored springs, pathways that generations had dismissed as too dangerous, too arduous for fragile women. The men scoffed, warning her against such unrealistic notions, reminding her of her place. Her own mother, with tears in her eyes, pleaded with her to reconsider, to accept their fate with grace. But the wolf in Alara's dreams no longer howled in lament. It snarled with purpose. She began to speak, her voice, usually soft, now resonated with an unfamiliar strength. She presented her findings, her arguments meticulously reasoned, her conviction unwavering. The villagers, accustomed to her quiet acquiescence, were taken aback. Some were openly dismissive, seeing her sudden assertiveness as an affront to tradition. Others, however, perhaps sensing the truth in her words, perhaps desperate for any glimmer of hope, began to listen. This was Alara's individuation journey, her nascent self beginning to differentiate from the collective unconscious, breaking free from the societal norms that had defined her. She was shedding the skin of the expected, embracing the unacknowledged depths of her own psyche. The turning point came during a village council meeting, under the oppressive heat of the midday sun. The air was thick with despair, with arguments circling endlessly, leading nowhere. Alara stood, her quiet presence commanding an unexpected silence. Her gaze, usually demure, now held the unyielding intensity of the mountain peaks she so admired. She spoke not with anger, but with an impassioned resolve, her words a tapestry of logic and raw emotion. She challenged their resignation, their reliance on antiquated beliefs. "Are we to surrender to thirst?" she declared, her voice ringing clear. "Or are we to awaken the dormant strength within us? This is not a time for fear, but for fury. A fury that demands we fight for our survival, for the future of our children." She detailed her plan, a daring trek through treacherous terrain to a hidden spring she had discovered in ancient lore. The fear of the unknown, the fear of challenging established patriarchal norms, clashed with the desperate hope she ignited. A heated debate ensued, fueled by apprehension and a reluctant admiration for her audacity. Some men, their egos bruised by a woman's leadership, attempted to dismiss her, but others, recognizing the pragmatic wisdom in her words, began to waver. It was a stark example of ego projection, where their own insecurity and fear of change were cast upon her as recklessness. But Alara stood firm, her composure unshaken, her inner strength radiating outward. She wasn't seeking validation. She was simply stating the truth as she perceived it. Her unwavering conviction, combined with the palpable desperation of the situation, slowly began to sway the tide. Alara's decision to lead the expedition was met with a mixture of awe and apprehension. A small group of men, initially reluctant, and a few women, inspired by her courage, eventually joined her. The journey was arduous, fraught with peril. Days bled into nights under a merciless sun, their supplies dwindling, their spirits tested. There were moments of doubt, moments when the ancient fears of the wilderness threatened to overwhelm them. But each time, when despair loomed, Alara's quiet determination, her unyielding focus, reignited their resolve. She was not a commander, barking orders. She was a guide, her presence a steady beacon. When a difficult passage required a delicate touch, her empathy and intuitive understanding of the terrain proved invaluable. When strength was needed, she led by example, pushing her own physical limits. This was the practical application of self-efficacy, as Albert Bandura described it, her belief in her own ability to succeed growing with each obstacle overcome, inspiring the same belief in those around her. Her feminine qualities, her intuition, her capacity for nurturing hope, her innate resilience were not weaknesses, but powerful assets. They were the very tools that navigated them through the unforgiving landscape. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, they found it. A hidden oasis, a spring bubbling forth from the earth, cool and clear. The sight was met with a collective gasp of relief, then a joyous cry. The water, a symbol of life and renewal, quenched their thirst and revitalized their spirits. They returned to the village as heroes, carrying not only water, but a newfound hope. Alara, the quiet, compliant woman, had transformed. Her journey had not only saved her community, but had also ignited within her a profound sense of self-worth and purpose. She had faced her own shadow, embracing the assertive, courageous aspects she had once suppressed. She had undergone individuation, becoming a more integrated, authentic self. The archetype of the feminine soul, often misconstrued as fragile or passive, is in fact a reservoir of immense power, a sacred fury waiting to be unleashed not for destruction, but for creation, for protection, for the restoration of balance. The story of Valera is a potent reminder that true strength isn't about brute force or dominance, but about unwavering resolve, intuitive wisdom, and the courage to challenge oppressive norms. When you, too, feel the stirrings of this sacred fury within your own soul, recognize it not as a flaw, but as a divine call to action. It is the wisdom of the anima calling you to embrace your deepest truths, to integrate your suppressed power. Do not shy away from your righteous anger, your firm boundaries, or your unwavering conviction. These are not antithetical to your femininity. They are intrinsic to its profound depth. Embrace the warrior within you, the one who stands sentinel over your truth and your well-being. Dare to challenge the narratives that seek to diminish your power. What would it mean for you to fully embody your own sacred fury, not as aggression, but as an unbreakable commitment to your authentic self? Today, more than ever, we see the pervasive narrative that labels a woman's emotional depth, her very capacity for feeling intensely, as a sign of weakness or irrationality. It is a subtle, yet insidious, form of gaslighting that denies the profound strength embedded within the feminine emotional landscape. This dismissal often stems from a societal discomfort with raw, unbridled emotion, particularly when it emanates from women. We are taught to be calm, composed, to suppress the natural ebb and flow of our inner worlds, lest we be deemed too much. But what if this rich tapestry of emotion, far from being a liability, is actually the wellspring of profound intuition, radical empathy, and an unyielding resilience? What if the very act of feeling deeply is not weakness, but a gateway to a power rarely acknowledged, often misunderstood, and consistently undervalued? Consider the profound insights offered by Carl Rogers, a pioneer in humanistic psychology, who championed the concept of unconditional positive regard and the individual's inherent drive towards self-actualization. Rogers posited that true growth and healing occur when an individual is met with acceptance, empathy, and genuineness. Yet, for countless women, this unconditional positive regard has been conspicuously absent, replaced by a subtle, often unconscious, demand for emotional conformity. The message, internalized from childhood, is often, be nice, don't make waves, don't be angry, don't be too sad, don't be too loud. This societal conditioning often forces women to disown parts of their authentic emotional experience, creating a schism between their inner truth and their outward presentation. The consequence is a profound sense of alienation from self, a stifling of the very emotions that could guide them, inform them, and empower them. Think of the woman who, having been told her entire life that her tears are a sign of fragility, learns to cry in secret, stifling the natural release that grief or frustration demands. Or the woman who, having been labeled hysterical for expressing righteous anger at injustice, learns to swallow her fury, allowing it to fester within, turning inward. This suppression, rather than creating strength, actually cultivates a fertile ground for anxiety, depression, and a pervasive sense of unworthiness. It is a profound disservice, for it denies the wisdom that resides within every emotional state. Sigmund Freud, though often critiqued, laid foundational groundwork for understanding the unconscious mind and the impact of early experiences. His concept of repression, the unconscious mechanism by which disturbing thoughts, memories, or desires are pushed from the conscious mind, offers a powerful lens through which to view the societal pressure on feminine emotion. When a woman is implicitly or explicitly told that certain emotions are unacceptable, she learns to repress them. This isn't a conscious choice, but a survival mechanism, a way to navigate a world that punishes emotional authenticity. But these repressed emotions don't simply vanish. They manifest in myriad ways. Chronic anxiety, unexplained physical ailments, a pervasive sense of emptiness, or even sudden, seemingly irrational outbursts. The very act of suppressing the sacred fury within, the righteous anger at injustice, the profound sorrow of loss, the unbridled joy of liberation, creates an internal pressure cooker. It's akin to trying to hold a geyser under a small lid. Eventually, the pressure will find an outlet, often in unintended and self-defeating ways. This leads us to the critical importance of emotional intelligence and the ability to process and integrate a full spectrum of feelings. Albert Bandura's concept of observational learning is particularly relevant here. Girls observe how women around them express or suppress emotions, and they internalize these patterns. If they witness mothers, grandmothers, or female role models constantly prioritizing the comfort of others over their own emotional truth, they learn that this is the correct way to be a woman. This creates a cycle of emotional suppression that passes from one generation to the next, subtly eroding the inherent power of the feminine emotional landscape. Think about the common phrase, "Don't be so emotional," hurled as an insult, particularly at women. It's a dismissal, a minimization, an attempt to strip away the validity of their experience. But what if being emotional is actually a sign of acute awareness, a finely tuned sensitivity to the nuances of the world, a deep connection to one's authentic self? William James, in his exploration of the stream of consciousness, understood the rich, flowing, and often contradictory nature of human experience. He would argue that denying any part of this stream, especially our emotional responses, is to deny a fundamental aspect of our being. The act of truly feeling, of allowing emotions to move through you without judgment or suppression, is a profoundly courageous act. It requires a form of stoicism, not in the sense of emotionless detachment, but in the Seneca-inspired understanding of acknowledging and processing external events and internal reactions without being enslaved by them. It's about recognizing that fear, anger, and sorrow are messengers, not masters. They carry vital information, signaling boundaries crossed, needs unmet, or injustices witnessed. To silence these messengers is to walk blindfolded through life. The woman who can sit with her anger, truly understand its roots, and channel it into constructive action is not weak. She is a force of nature. The woman who can embrace her sorrow, allow it to wash over her, and emerge with a deeper sense of empathy and resilience is not fragile. She is a phoenix rising from the ashes of pain. This is the essence of healing psychology, recognizing that pain, when acknowledged and processed, can be a profound catalyst for growth. The societal pressure to conform to a narrowly defined emotional spectrum for women often leads to a profound internal conflict, a kind of psychological dissonance that Erik Erikson might describe as a challenge to one's sense of identity versus role confusion. If a woman's authentic emotional expression clashes with the expected societal role, she experiences a fundamental internal struggle. The very act of reclaiming her full emotional range becomes an act of defiance, an assertion of her inherent right to be whole. This is where empowering feminism intersects with deep psychological understanding. It is the assertion that a woman's emotional landscape is a source of power, not a weakness to be contained. It is a call to dismantle the patriarchal structures that have sought to delegitimize her feelings, and to embrace the full, vibrant spectrum of what it means to be a feeling, sensing human being. Consider the often overlooked power of empathy, an emotion that is deeply rooted in the feminine psyche. Jean Piaget, in his studies of cognitive development, highlighted the evolution of understanding others' perspectives. While his work primarily focused on children, the adult application suggests that the capacity for deep empathy is a hallmark of emotional maturity and a powerful tool for connection and influence, as Dale Carnegie might attest. When a woman is fully connected to her own emotions, she can more authentically connect with the emotions of others, fostering deeper relationships, navigating complex social dynamics, and inspiring collective action. Her ability to feel the pain of others, to understand their struggles, is not a burden. It is a profound asset that enables her to lead with compassion, to build bridges, and to foster understanding. This is the emotional intelligence that transforms communities, heals divisions, and drives meaningful change. It is not a gentle, passive force. It is an active, engaged, and powerful force for good. The true strength of the feminine soul lies not in its ability to suppress or deny emotion, but in its profound capacity to feel it all: the joy, the sorrow, the anger, the fear, the boundless love, and to transform these raw experiences into wisdom, empathy, and action. It is a strength rooted in authenticity, a power born from vulnerability, and a wisdom gleaned from the depths of personal experience. When you find yourself in moments where your emotions feel overwhelming, remember that they are not a defect. They are data. They are guides. They are the compass of your soul. Do you allow yourself the full range of your emotions, or do you suppress them, fearing judgment or misunderstanding? If a man were to exhibit unwavering resolve, a fierce protectiveness of his loved ones, and an unyielding commitment to justice, he would likely be hailed as a paragon of strength, a leader worthy of admiration. Yet, when a woman embodies these very same qualities, often born from a deeper well of empathy and a profound connection to the life force itself, she is frequently met with discomfort, even fear, and labeled with derogatory terms. This double standard is not an accident. It is a deliberate societal construct designed to disempower the feminine, to muzzle the raw, creative, and transformative energy that lies at its heart. The true nature of the feminine soul is not a fragile bloom, but a volcano, dormant perhaps, but capable of erupting with a sacred fury that purifies, dismantles, and rebuilds. It is the primal scream of creation, the fierce defense of life, and the unwavering commitment to truth. Consider the journey of Amara, a woman who had spent her life navigating the treacherous waters of self-doubt, a shadow cast by a childhood riddled with subtle dismissals and overt criticisms of her intelligence and ambition. Her parents, well-meaning in their own way, had often inadvertently reinforced a narrative that she was too much, too curious, too opinionated, too independent. This had cultivated within her a deeply ingrained inferiority complex, a pervasive feeling of not being good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough. She found herself constantly seeking external validation, particularly from romantic partners, believing that their approval would fill the void within. Each relationship became a desperate attempt to prove her worth, a self-defeating cycle of seeking affirmation from sources that could never truly satisfy her deepest yearning. The more she sought external praise, the more elusive inner peace became. It was a classic demonstration of what Carl Rogers would describe as a lack of self-regard, where her internal compass was misaligned, always pointing outward rather than inward. She had become a chameleon, adapting her opinions, her desires, even her personality, to fit the perceived expectations of those around her, especially the men in her life. One relationship, in particular, with a charismatic but emotionally manipulative man named Reese, brought Amara to the precipice of her own destruction. Reese, with his charming veneer, was a master of subtle invalidation. He would praise her only to subtly undermine her, dismiss her feelings as overreactions, and project his own insecurities onto her, a clear example of ego projection. "You're so sensitive, Amara," he'd often say, with a condescending smile, whenever she expressed hurt or frustration. "Why do you always make such a big deal out of everything?" These insidious remarks chipped away at her self-esteem, reinforcing the childhood narrative that her emotional responses were inherently flawed. She found herself constantly apologizing, constantly second-guessing her own perceptions, trapped in a silent battle against her own intuition. The more she tried to earn his approval, the more her inner light dimmed. She became a shell of her former self, her once vibrant spirit dulled by the relentless erosion of her self-worth. It was a profound psychological wounding, one that deeply affected her attachment style, leading to anxious attachment where she clung to the very source of her pain, fearing abandonment more than personal annihilation. Her body began to betray her, manifesting the internal turmoil as chronic fatigue and an inexplicable anxiety that gnawed at her waking hours and haunted her sleep. The turning point came not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet, internal awakening. One evening, after a particularly draining argument with Reese, where her feelings were once again dismissed as illogical, Amara found herself staring into her own reflection. What she saw was a stranger, a pale, drawn woman with vacant eyes, a reflection of the vibrant spirit she had lost. A single tear tracked down her cheek, but it was not a tear of sorrow. It was a tear of recognition, of a long-suppressed rage finally stirring to life. In that moment, something shifted. The subtle whisper of her intuition, long ignored, now became a clarion call. It was a flicker of sacred fury, not directed outward at Reese, but inward, at the years of self-betrayal. She remembered a quote from Marcus Aurelius, a figure of stoicism, which she had once read and dismissed. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This wasn't about suppressing emotion. It was about realizing the internal locus of control, recognizing that her power lay not in changing Reese, but in changing herself. This was the nascent stage of her individuation journey, the arduous but essential process of becoming her authentic self, separate from the expectations and projections of others. The next few months were a silent revolution. Amara began to meticulously unravel the intricate knots of her emotional conditioning. She started by journaling, pouring out every suppressed emotion, every dismissed thought, every buried resentment onto the page. This act of externalizing her internal chaos was profoundly cathartic, a vital step in shadow work, bringing to light the disowned parts of herself. She began to actively challenge Reese's dismissals, not with aggression, but with calm, reasoned assertions of her own reality. When he would say, "You're being too emotional," she would respond, "My emotions are valid, and they are telling me something important. I will not apologize for feeling." These were not easy conversations. They were met with resistance, with more attempts at gaslighting, but Amara's resolve was now rooted in an unwavering belief in her own truth. She began to re-engage with activities she had abandoned. Painting, hiking in nature, activities that reconnected her to her intrinsic joy and power, independent of external validation. She started setting boundaries, initially small, then increasingly firm. No became a word she learned to wield with quiet authority. This was her reclaiming of personal agency, a manifestation of self-efficacy, as Albert Bandura would describe it, her belief in her ability to exert control over her own functioning and events. The climax of her internal transformation came when Reese, frustrated by her newfound independence, escalated his manipulative tactics, attempting to isolate her from friends and family. This was the final straw. Amara, no longer the compliant, self-doubting woman, looked at him with clear eyes, devoid of fear or anger, only a profound sense of self-respect. "I deserve a love that honors my emotions, not dismisses them," she stated, her voice steady and resonant. "I deserve a partner who sees my strength, not tries to diminish it. And I deserve to be myself, fully and completely, without apology." The words were not a plea, but a declaration, an assertion of her inherent worth. She ended the relationship, not with a dramatic outburst, but with a quiet, resolute act of self-preservation. It was a moment of profound emotional release, a letting go of the need for external validation, and a peaceful inner rebirth. The sacred fury had done its work, not as a destructive force, but as a cleansing fire, burning away the illusions and liberating her authentic self. The feminine soul, when allowed to express its full spectrum of emotion, particularly its righteous anger and fierce protectiveness, is anything but weak. It is a force of sacred fury, a wellspring of transformative power. The pain Amara experienced, the invalidation and self-doubt, was merely the fertile ground from which her true strength emerged. Her journey underscores the profound truth that our deepest wounds can become our greatest sources of power when we dare to face them, to integrate our shadows, and to embrace our authentic selves. To fully heal and reclaim your power, you must cultivate unwavering self-worth, recognizing that your value is intrinsic, not derived from external approval. Embrace your emotions, for they are not flaws, but powerful guides. Allow yourself to feel deeply, to grieve fully, to express your anger righteously, and to celebrate your joy unreservedly. This is the path of individuation, of becoming who you are truly meant to be. Step into your truth, knowing that your emotional depth is a superpower, not a vulnerability. What part of your own sacred fury are you ready to reclaim and unleash into the world, not as a destructive force, but as a catalyst for your most authentic and powerful self? If you find this resonates with you, or you see yourself in Amara's journey, please leave a comment to share your insights. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please send them this video as a necessary share. Thanks for watching. The end.